All right, so you're ready to learn about Galician.
Let's dive in.
We've got a ton of cool stuff to look at today.
Yeah.
Not just like boring grammar rules.
Definitely not.
We're talking history, culture.
For sure.
Even some like linguistic controversy.
It's going to be good.
Should be interesting. So most people have heard of Spanish and Portuguese, right?
Right.
But Galician, this language we're talking about today, it's like their less famous sibling.
Kind of, yeah.
Why is that?
That's what we are going to find out.
Okay, I'm in. You know, when I was looking through everything you sent over, I was blown away. There are written documents in Galician that go all the way back to the 1200s.
That's even older than some countries.
It's true. It's wild. And it's not like they're just scribbling on cave walls. These are legal papers.
Oh, yeah?
Poetry, music, the whole deal.
Sophisticated stuff.
Yeah.
And it gives us a glimpse into life in the kingdom of Galicia, where this language, where Galician Portuguese was king.
Whoa, hold up.
What's up?
A whole kingdom. I feel like I missed that history class.
What's real? And back in the 13th, 14th centuries, Galician Portuguese, it wasn't just some regional thing. It had some real power.
Yeah.
Shaped the culture, the literature, everything.
So if this language was such a big deal, what happened?
Right.
Why isn't everyone speaking Galician Portuguese right now?
Yeah. One of the texts you sent mentioned something about a dark age for the language.
Yeah, that doesn't sound good.
No, not really. Things started to change, politically speaking, around the 14th century. Portugal and Galicia, they kind of went their separate ways.
Okay.
And the languages, while still very connected, they started evolving differently, like two branches on the same tree.
Makes sense.
Growing in different directions.
Interesting. So it's not like there was one big dramatic split.
No,
it was more gradual.
Yeah, pushed along by what was happening around it, you know.
Wow. So were there any other, like, major players that showed up, you know, that had a big impact on how Galician developed?
Oh, yeah. There's one more character we got to talk about.
Okay, who's that?
Well, it's kind of hard to miss.
Okay.
We're talking about Spanish.
Oh, right. Spanish. I figured they had come to the picture somewhere.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to talk about Galician without mentioning Spanish influence.
Definitely.
So what happened there?
So as Castile started gaining power, Spanish started spreading like wildfire.
Yeah.
And poor Galician, it got kind of pushed aside. Not completely gone, but it became more of a home thing.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, like people would still speak it with their families at the market, you know, casual stuff.
Right.
But for anything official, government, legal documents, fancy stuff like that, Spanish was the star of the show.
So it's like this weird, two-level thing going on.
Yeah, totally.
Where you have one language for everyday life.
Exactly.
And then another one for, important stuff.
That's diglossia in a nutshell, right there. Right, diglossia. That was the word in one of these articles. Okay, so that makes sense. But how did Galician survive all of that? I mean, if Spanish was the big dog in town, you'd think eventually everyone would just switch over, right?
You'd think so, but Galician had a trick up its sleeve. The Rexurdimento.
The what?
The Rexurdimento. It's a whole thing of like a revival. 19th century, people start getting really into Galician culture again, literature, music, the whole shebang.
Really?
Yeah. It was like this big we're still here moment. People like Rosalia de Castro.
Okay.
She was writing incredible poetry all about the Galician countryside, and it really resonated with people.
Cool.
And then there was Eduardo Pondal. He was all about Galician mythology and these ancient Celtic roots. Really cool stuff.
Wow. Okay, so it wasn't just about keeping the language alive at home anymore. They wanted the world to know about it.
Exactly.
That's awesome. But it also kind of brings us to this whole debate I keep bumping into.
But yeah, what's that?
Is Galician its own language, or is it like a dialect of Portuguese?
The million-dollar question.
Right. It's like a linguistic minefield.
It really is. And to understand it, you got to go back to those branches we were talking about.
Yeah.
The Galician Portuguese family tree, right?
Right.
So some linguists, they look at Galician and Portuguese today, and they're like, those are two different things. The grammar's different. The words are different.
Right. I can see.
Enough to be considered separate languages.
Yeah, that makes sense. But what about the other folks?
The other side.
Yeah, the ones who say it's a dialect.
Right. So they're more focused on the similarities, the shared history. They see Galician and Portuguese more like two sides of the same coin.
Okay.
Dialects of this bigger Galician Portuguese thing.
Two sides of the same coin. I like that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't tell us where they think Galician should go, you know?
Exactly. And that's where it gets really interesting. Take the reintegrationist movement, for example.
Okay, I've heard of them.
They want closer ties with Portuguese. They even use a modified Portuguese writing system for Galician.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Their argument is that if we recognize Galician as part of this bigger Portuguese-speaking world, it could give it more weight,
Yeah.
help it stand out against Spanish.
Fascinating. So it's not just about like what a dictionary says, it's about like identity
Yes.
in the future of the language. So what about now?
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about the past, but where does Galician stand today?
It's still a bit of a balancing act,
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if you walk down the street, say, in a big city in Galicia,
Okay.
you're going to hear a lot of Spanish. That's just like everyday life for most people.
Makes sense.
But then
Yeah.
you head out to the countryside, maybe a small village up in the hills somewhere,
Okay.
and suddenly you might overhear someone singing an old Galician folk song.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
It's really something. It's like stepping back in time.
So it sounds like even though Spanish is really widespread, Galician is still holding on, especially in those places where
Absolutely.
it's like really connected to people's roots.
Exactly. It's the language of their grandparents, their great-grandparents, passed down through generations. It's a real testament to how strong a connection people have to their culture.
Definitely. Language is powerful.
For sure.
So what's next for Galician?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Right.
I mean, it's taught in schools now, which is great.
Yeah.
The government uses it. There's even a Galician TV channel.
Wow. No kidding. That's great.
Yeah. But to really make sure it thrives, I think it needs to be more than just, something you study in a textbook or watch on a special channel. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah. So how do we do that? How do we get people speaking more Galician, using it every day?
Well, we have to keep supporting it, right?
Of course.
Make sure it's in schools, in the media,
Yeah.
maybe some awesome new Galician movies. Imagine that.
Now that I would watch.
Right. In music, literature, all of it.
Yeah. That would be incredible.
It's about showing the world how vibrant and alive this language still is.
I love that. Well, I have to say, this whole deep dive on Galician has been eye-opening.
Glad to hear it.
We started with these crazy old documents from like centuries ago.
Yeah.
We talked about this whole diglossia thing, which was super interesting. And now this whole debate about language versus dialect.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It really makes you realize that there's so much more to Galician than meets the eye.
100%.
It's definitely more than just a dialect. It has a rich history, a
Absolutely.
vibrant culture,
For sure.
and hopefully a bright future ahead of it.
Here's hoping.
Well, that was fascinating. So, to everyone listening, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on Galician? Where do you think it fits in the big, wide world of languages? Let us know.